Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Outdoor Recreation NI training webinar. This one is called Visitor Management Through Signage. I hope you're all well and enjoying the good weather we've been having. Hopefully everyone got out for a bit of a walk at lunchtime. So thank you all for taking the time to attend today's webinar. We're delighted to have you online with us. I'm joined by Philip Weston, Joe Murray and Beverley Magowan, all from Outdoor Recreation NI, and Michelle McCaughtry from Woodland Trust. So I think everyone should be kind of filtering through, but I'll go through a bit of quick housekeeping before we get started. Just as the last kind of few people filter in. This webinar is being recorded and you will all receive a copy of the webinar later on in the week. So don't fret if you have to kind of make an early exit or if you're attending on behalf of another employee. We've lots of attendees today, so ensure the quality of the presentations is high and it holds up for our speakers. We ask that everyone turns their cameras off for the presentations and keep themselves on mute, and this prevents any interruptions. And then when it gets to the Q&A section at the end of this webinar, then you can kind of turn your cameras back on and unmute yourselves. So there is going to be a Q&A session at the end. You can either write your questions in the chat pane as you go through, and you can kind of direct those to an individual speaker or just kind of generally, or you can raise your virtual hand once we get to the Q&A section. So for anyone that's new to these webinars and to Outdoor Recreation NI, that's us. We're ORNI for short. We're a non-for-profit organisation who make it easier for people to responsibly enjoy the outdoors. Our vision is a more active and healthy society, appreciating the outdoors. And on the screen you'll see there our strategic priorities, and at the second point you'll see training and sharing best practice is one of those, which is what we're going to do today. Hopefully we're going to share some of our best practice about visitor management through signage. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Philip Weston.
Hi all, thanks Kerry. Thanks very much. So just by way of a bit of a welcome, so just the aim of today's session, we're hoping to provide an insight into the various approaches available to developing engaging, appropriate and useful signage and wayfinding for the purposes of visitor management on trails and within sites. The information we're providing today, it's based on our experience in ORNI and through our guest speaker from Woodland Trust, and basically from our experience of working on a range of outdoor recreation capital projects ranging from single-use trails to sites with multiple trails, users and functions. And it's important to say that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to trail site or area. The approaches discussed we feel are universal and transferable no matter the special characteristics, limitations and opportunities that exist. And the approaches are effective whether you're wishing to develop wayfinding, trailhead panels, safety signage or interpretation panels or any other type of signage. So often signage is the only communication the visitor has with the site owner, manager, or promoter, so it's important to get this right as it's the main aid to managing visitor flow appropriately. And this includes looking at the benefits of considering the site holistically in terms of its use, layout, size, and other unique characteristics. The session today, we'll start off with Bev, and Beverley will focus on the key considerations we follow based on benchmarking previous sites we and others have worked on in the UK and Ireland. Bev will look briefly at the benefits of developing a signage strategy as a resource for staff to make sure there's consistency across a site or multiple sites, as well as what the key factors for success and how to roll out a strategy and plan. Joe will look at physical signage, its positioning, key considerations, looking at materials and how to make sure your information and content is clear, concise and appropriate for the visitor and the way you want them to use and enjoy the site. And I'll follow with some learnings from projects when looking at wayfinding and safety signage. We have Michelle McCaughtry from Woodland Trust NI, who's going to provide an insight into what happens within a specific organisation and how consistency in signage is managed and issues dealt with regarding signage at one of their key sites in Northern Ireland. Who is this webinar for? So it's really for anyone that owns, manages or promotes an outdoor recreation site, a single community trail, an urban park, a forest park. Just to give you a bit of a background on our approach and sort of where we get our guidance and get our learnings. So there aren't really any specific rules. Our approach has been developed by following available best practice guidance from leading industry organisations and is informed by and born out of our experience. And you can see a list of the various different documents that we would refer to whenever we're looking at signage, and organisations that we would look to whenever we're looking at approaches surrounding use, language, appropriateness of messaging, etc. It's important to note, I suppose, that we're not the experts. We haven't done it all, we haven't seen it all. We're just helping to show what is out there, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and hopefully help you to think about the bigger picture the next time you're planning your trailer site. And there'll be plenty of time for questions and comments at the end, and we welcome discussion on what has worked and what has not worked for you. Before I hand over to Bev, I just want to give you a bit of a background on what we, beyond sort of the guidance documents. We base our approach to signage fundamentally in visitor safety group principles, which focus on balancing the need for visitor enjoyment of the unspoiled environment with the need to foster appropriate behaviour and highlight any unusual hazards. So it can be a difficult balance, ensuring that the visitor is kept safe and informed whilst being allowed to enjoy the freedom and explore the natural landscape or outdoor recreation site that they've come to visit. These apply across all visitor types and all environments and ensure that the visitor personal responsibility and responsibility of the landowner or manager are considered. We look at the fundamental principles, or the principles, first of all, fundamentals, which is not taking the sense of freedom or sense of adventure away from the visitor. Awareness of the risks, in that we never want to have any nasty surprises for the visitor. Partnership, in that we understand that the visitor groups and individuals, each visitor group and individuals require different levels of intervention. When we look at responsibility, it's about providing the right amount of intervention and the right type of information. And risk control is ensuring consistency in approach to risk management and control across your site. Fundamentally, signage is about managing safety and experience. As site owners, managers and promoters, there are many roles you hold within the visitor journey. Creating positive visitor memories and experiences, ensuring the visitor understands information and that the communications are intended for them, and managing access to and around the destination through visitor flow. So managing the visitor should therefore be clear and well designed, located strategically and in keeping with the environment to raise and maintain awareness. So as we can already tell, there's a lot to consider when looking at the visitor management through signage. So let's get started. I'm going to hand over to Bev, who'll go through where we start from when we're looking at signage and visitor flow.
Thank you, Philip. I'm just going to share my screen here, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. As Philip said, my name is Beverley Magowan, and I'm Head of Communications and Training within Outdoor Recreation NI. Within my role and my experience with signage has been from I've worked at various outdoor sites across Northern Ireland to evaluate their current signage, put in place signage strategies to improve and also ensure there's a consistent approach to signage across sites and across organisations. And I've also been involved with the production and installation of signage. So this afternoon I want to start with what are the key considerations for you before you even start to put any signage into the ground. And then outline the signage hierarchy or kind of signage family of signs that you can install within a site. And finally, then I just want to finish off with a few key success factors before I hand over to my colleague Joe. So as Philip previously mentioned, well-informed and well-placed signage is the ultimate way to create a positive visitor experience. And a lot of site managers also use it as a tool to manage visitors, because you're going to be directing visitors in an anticipated way. You know where they will go. And it also can be used to improve a site with very minimal spend. I suppose then, in order to work out what signage exactly you need, and where it is to go, it's worth considering these four questions. So the first one there is about thinking about who actually is your visitor. So who visits your site at present? How do they access? Is it through the main entrance, or is there different access points? Where do they go within your site, and what do they do? Because thinking about this will ultimately determine actually who is going to read your signage, so that you can make sure that you've suitably informed that person and that the information is targeted at them. What do you want to tell them? So whatever information you provide is going to dictate how they explore the site and where they go. You also need to think about providing appropriate information for that audience. You know, some people find it difficult to read a map, so stay away from using complicated maps. Using something much similar will make sure that it's more easily understood. And also have a think about what safety information do you need to provide? Do you need to tell them about grades of trail? And what does that mean for the user? And is there certain places where they can and can't go, or is there trail crossings that you need to make them aware of? Third question is, when do you want to actually tell them? So I suppose where are the most important visitor points along the visitor journey that you want to inform that visitor? So how do you want signage to interact with the visitor to supplement their experience and complement their experience? Is that going to be when they get out of the car, or when they start actually on a trail? And then finally, it's how do you want to tell them? And I suppose then the how can kind of be brought together under the development of a signage strategy. And the signage strategy will ensure that there's a consistent approach to developing and installing signage within not even your site, within your organisation as well. So all staff are provided guidance on what to do. And that will include things like a brand, so that you have a unique and standardised design across, whether that's one site or multiple sites within your area. And it can also provide guidance on font and colours and tone of voice. It'll also include things like the type of signs that you need and the location, and that will really force you to think holistically about the site. So you're thinking about what signage is required for the whole site as opposed to just in one area. Specification, whether you want to provide guidance on what actually is to be used for producing signage. So whether that's going to be aluminium based or GRP based, or what type of housing, what type of timber do you want actually to for the production of signage. And then finally then is providing guidance on content, so and how that's going to be structured and laid out. So is there always to be the title on the left hand side, or where's the main body of text, or where a map should go and what that should look like. So from our experience within Outdoor Recreation NI, we've benchmarked numerous outdoor signage across numerous sites across the UK and Ireland. Most sites seem to employ this kind of signage hierarchy and making that relevant to the points along the visitor journey. And what I mean by visitor journey is that basically those kind of major stages or interactions that a typical person go through whenever they're visiting your site. So whether that's like entering the site, arriving into the car park, getting out of the car. So this table just gives an overview of each stage in the visitor journey there on the left hand side in that kind of darker green. The location in the middle of where that is, and then we've aligned that to what type of sign would be required on the right hand side. And it's just, I suppose, worth noting at this point that the signage requirements will very much depend on the scale and size of a site. So, a smaller site would probably only require maybe, 2 or 3 types of these signs. You're not going to employ all of these signs. So it's just worth, and as Philip had mentioned, like there's no one size fits all here. So the next couple of slides, I'm just going to provide an example of each sign type that we've listed here in the right-hand column. So all of the examples following on these slides that I've used are from Gosford Forest Park in County Armagh. And that's basically because it's an actual working example for us. We developed a brand and set of signage guidelines for this site which they have used in this site, and they've actually also rolled across along other sites within the council area. And this was part of a much bigger site, a larger project to enhance the outdoor offering, and that included the development of walking and mountain bike trails and installing adventure play items as well. So the first example there is an entrance sign. I suppose the main purpose of an entrance sign is to provide that warm welcome for the visitor and create that sense of arrival, that they've actually arrived at the intended site. It normally includes the name of the site. It'll probably be the first sign that they see with your brand, so kind of introduces the brand that they're likely to see across the whole site. And it also will provide any kind of organisation or partner logo. So you'll see there that we have included the council logo, who lease and maintain parts of the site for outdoor recreation, and then also included Forest Service, who are the landowner of that site. The second example is of a welcome sign, excuse me, and that again contains welcoming messages, but it's also a really good way to outline the key unique selling points of a site. So using imagery, so whether you want to outline kind of what types of trails or if there's certain play areas there, you can have them in these kind of welcome signs. And it kind of creates a wee bit of an excitement that people have arrived and they're going to be exploring the site soon. It's typically located from the main entrance to a car park, so and typically on an entrance road. Car park signage directs visitors along the car or along the kind of entrance road to park their car, and also provides information on facilities within that site. It can also be used to reiterate opening and closing times too. You could see that quite a lot, and will be located on the way from the car park then to the main entrance to guide and direct that visitor. Visitor information panel basically provides an overview of everything at the site. So what trails are there, points of interest, what facilities are there, what can they see and do, and it will really give them a good overview of what there is to see and do, so that they can make an informed decision on what they want to do and where they want to go. Normally you'll find a visitor information panel in a main visitor zone, basically where the most visitors will pass through, probably somewhere like within a car park. And it typically will include things like orientation map, trail information, the facilities that are there, any kind of codes of conduct, contact details, that type of thing. Visitor flow signage. So these are, I suppose, orientation kind of way markers that help the user navigate throughout a site to main points of interest. So it's reducing that need for larger information panels, and they're normally and very useful for navigating a more complex site, and they're placed then throughout the site. Facility panel. The purpose of these panels is to provide information on a specific facility at that site. So whether that's maybe directions, you can see here is an example of the pump track at Gosford, whether that's directions on how you actually use it, if there's any kind of open and closing times, if that's relevant, if there's any safety information they need to know, any kind of contact information they need to know as well. Trailhead panels. So these will give the user an overview of all the trails within the site, again, so they can see which trail suits them and where they want to go within the site as well. You will find them normally at kind of the starting point of any trails, and they will include things like a trail map, trail names, grades, short description of the trails, their length, the time it takes to complete them, any kind of emergency or safety information. Waymarkers then are directional arrows really located along the trail. First of all, they provide information on the trail grade and also providing vital orientation information for users. So it ensures visitors obviously don't then get lost on a trail, and it kind of as well provides a sense of reassurance that when somebody sees that sign that they know, well, I'm actually on the right track. Safety signage then should be placed just throughout the site where you need to inform of regulations and policies, and that's really with the ultimate aim of encouraging that desirable behaviour. Interpretation panel are really just a way to provide more historical and environmental information about key areas in the site. So they'll normally contain, information on an area of interest and be supplemented with images, whether they're from the past or present. You can see this example here is of the Gosford Castle within the domain. And then finally, exit signage. Again, it's used to thank the visitors. And a way it's just to leave a nice tone. It thanks them and encourages them then to visit in the future. That this type of sign will be located between the car park and exit of the site, and normally along an exit road if you have one. And again, it will normally contain the name of the site and any kind of partner relevant organisations. So through our experience with outdoor signage, I'm just going to go over some of the key kind of factors of success that I will typically follow whenever working on signage. So first of all is all signs should be designed using the same brand, colours and tone of voice. And that's really so that you're providing a consistent design. And the reason why you want to do that is you want to ensure that signs are easily recognisable throughout the whole site, even from a distance. The consistency also creates a sense of comfort for the user, so kind of making them sure that this is a sign that I should be looking at. This is part of this site. This is from this organisation that owns the site. It's just like you'll see from their examples that I've used of Gosford that everything is consistent in the design. Choose a signage hierarchy that suits your site. So because the amount of signage outlined previously, that will only suit certain sites. We've used that was used in Gosford because it's a large site with multiple trails and multiple users. So it does require all of those signage. But the council did install signage and used the same kind of brand guidelines within other sites within the Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon council area. Now, they were much smaller sites. They only had one type of trail, and that was a few walking trails, and they actually streamlined theirs down into only 3 types of signs. Another option is to think about developing maybe a tiered system of signage. If you want to manage, or if you do manage a range of different size of sites as well, you can think about that. And then ensuring your signage is accurate, well maintained and up to date. So if signage is out of date and not maintained, you can expect it to have a negative impact on the visitor experience. It'll also provide inaccurate information, which means that it'll be harder for you to manage where people go because you're providing that wrong information and you don't actually know where visitors are going. And because it's not creating a good experience for the visitor, they'll probably likely not return as a result. Another key factor is don't oversign. So signing causes confusion for the visitor, and it also means that really important information is probably more often overlooked. One way to overcome this is to consider incorporating safety signs. So say such as a trailhead panel that you're considering including safety messages within it. It's really just going to avoid placing loads of signs in the one location and the visitor then becoming confused. Ensure signs are well placed. So signs really should be seen on arrival, and therefore they're located at those kind of main access points to site or in car parks, or if it's a safety sign that they're near the hazard. They also should be located close to the centre of vision and not obscured by any vegetation. And then the last point really is, and most importantly, is to ensure that your content provides enough information for the visitor to make that informed decision of where they want to go and ultimately how they're going to get there safely. Otherwise, really, the sign is a bit pointless because the visitor is a bit confused, and again, they're going to be unlikely to return. So thank you for listening. I hope you found that useful. I'm happy to take any questions at the end, but now I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Joe who is going to outline in practice some of these key factors of success that I've just outlined. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you, Kerry, Philip and Bev there. So hi everyone, I'm Joe Murray and I work in place shaping here at Outdoor Recreation Northern Ireland. What I want to chat a bit more about now is just those key factors of success in terms of signage that Bev talked us through there. I kind of want to explore the consequences of when those are overlooked and then hopefully showcase some good examples of effective signage practice for visitor management. So just want to begin there by exploring what it looks like, say, when those key success factors are neglected. So in many instances, sites have experienced an accumulation of signage over time, and this happens everywhere. And it's typically a reactive approach. It's driven by incidents that have happened that require safety signage put in place, new trails, or an expansion of a site. And what that can often lead to is a haphazard kind of collage of signs in different styles and conflicting information. And as Bev said there, it's very easy to overlook maybe important information whenever the overall look of the signage is cluttered. So you tend to just neglect it as well as a visitor. So for first-time visitors, as I say there, this mishmash of signage can be confusing and it hinders the ability to even navigate a site effectively if you come across that as soon as you get out of your car or as soon as you walk into a site. So rather than revising existing signage, we would sort of recommend that information is consolidated into one place because the result otherwise is this cluttered landscape and it kind of poses challenges for that orientation in that wayfinding perspective. And then that can be that issue can be further exacerbated as well if trailhead panels find themselves located below a tree. Even if that's well meaning to provide people with shelter, it can sometimes compromise the visibility due to insufficient lighting. In other cases, trailheads can be positioned perhaps too close to a car park or too close to an access lane, and that can force visitors to either stand in the way of traffic or have to navigate against traffic as well to try and read the maps or the relevant information. And it sort of takes their attention span away as well, and sort of threatens their safety too. Similarly, another aspect to consider is the clarity and the conciseness of content, which I'll probably delve most into today as well. Visitors don't have ample time to read extensive and intricate panels. They're outdoors first and foremost, and that means they're often distracted by the weather or people that they're with, pets, or keeping an eye on children as well. So realistically, people have seconds really to engage with your signage and just need to get that key information. But by addressing these sort of shortcomings or these neglects, you can create signage that maximizes visitor engagement and sets a stage for a more positive and fulfilling experience at the sites as well. So just beginning there with sort of best practice in terms of positioning. And as Philip says, we're not the experts here. We're not saying this is the best practice, but this is how we interpret it. And this is what we've observed to work really well at sites. So well-placed visitor signage or trailhead signage holds probably the most important place in a signage hierarchy. I'd say nearly every site probably needs to have some sort of orientation, regardless of the scale or the nature of it. So the visitor's ability to locate a trailhead panel should be seamless from entering a site, either from an access point or leaving the car. It should sort of be that visual cue that draws people from their car, from the entrance, towards the trails. So what you want to do there is be placing it in a high visibility or safe location. And that visual connection should set a precedent then for the rest of the wayfinding experience. There should be a level of predictability that you know that the next turn or the next corner is going to be very clear for you for the rest of it. It's going to be very consistent. And that visual connection should probably be accompanied by a clear and safe and unobstructed pathway too. Further then, when considering that positioning, your panel and housing should be constructed of materials that shield it from weather conditions or adverse weather conditions there. And consideration should also be given to locate the panel in a space that is well lit for legibility. So as I say, it's not always the best option to put it below a tree because that can impact visibility. It's maybe best to create more robust housing if needed be. And a critical aspect of that trailhead panel is to consolidate all that key information in one place. Philip later is going to take us through the best practice and guidance of and guidance of wayfinding and safety signage further into the site. But within a visitor hub, it's important that visitors can access all the relevant information they need within one single location. So by doing this, visitors can easily grasp the essential details without the need to search through scattered or fragmented signage all around a car park. So just to give an example of where we think that works really well, I'm just going to draw your attention to the following trailhead area, and this is in Gosford Forest Park again in County Armagh. So it's a large, Gosford itself is a large and potentially complicated site with walking trails, cycling trails, mountain biking, horse riding and play trails as well. So what that requires is a series of trailhead panels to form a clear visual destination for visitors to navigate themselves from and to as well. So what's been provided here is a series of panels with plenty of space within them that's clear of any vehicle or foot traffic. From here, the visitor can quickly locate the relevant panel they need to follow and then be confidently orientated from that outset. In addition to that, you'll see sort of to the rear left of the panels and then zoomed into on the right there. What was also provided in Gosford was a large and distinctive arch that provides a powerful secondary visual cue. And that provides a very clear sense of progression and continuation into the trail and provides that level of predictability. So the arch not only works as a good visual landmark, but it adds the aesthetic appeal to the site as well. It's that kind of Instagram moment as well that encourages people and sort of even advertises the site for you too. Once any visitors sort of reach that panel then, it's important that they can easily understand and actually engage with the content that's on it. See, we've seen examples there previously of signage that's really cluttered with information that you just wouldn't know where to start. So in that respect, I just want to explore some of the key reasons why clarity and conciseness should be at the forefront whenever preparing content for a trailhead panel. And that works for interpretation, visitor information signs, leaflets, or even online information as well. So firstly, it's important to consider the diverse range of people that will come across your trailhead panel or your information panel. And it might come as a surprise that the average reading age of the UK population has been worked out to be approximately 9 years old, or somewhere between 8 and 12 years old. And that means that information and communication tools need to be accessible to that audience, but as a broad audience as well. And by using simple and straightforward language that avoids jargon and any sort of convoluted historical information, you can improve the comprehension of it for everyone visiting your site. You know, readability benefits everybody. So as I say, it's not down to your reading level, it can be down to the time you have to look at a panel and what's going on around you, and you know how much time you actually have to look at a panel. So additionally, in the same sense to that, some visitors will have physical challenges towards accessing the outdoors, whether that be a trail. But it's important to acknowledge that that same for accessing information that helps make that decision, that they're actually accessing the outdoors. So for instance, people with learning disabilities such as dyslexia or those with visual impairments, for those presenting information in a clear and concise manner, you can provide support for those individuals to actually understand and access that content and then further access the site. Language diversity can be another crucial factor to consider, whether it be, you know, in a country that has maybe 2 languages used, or just considering your users' English may not be their first language. So it's important to present information in a way that's understandable across various language backgrounds. So simplifying complex sentences, using universally recognized symbols, and helping to ensure that language barriers aren't the thing that hinder the enjoyment of understanding information about a trail or a space. And realistically, people tend to skim through content, and that's particularly true probably on a phone screen, but also in the outdoors, just for those distractions that I've addressed there. So it's important to present information in a concise and scannable format, with key details prominently displayed at the forefront, so visitors can just absorb important details at a quick glance. And just to reiterate that, people don't have time to read those extensive and complicated panels. They're distracted by everything around them, and they only have seconds to observe the panel. So this is worth keeping in mind when developing anything in terms of content that's public facing. If somebody gets out of their car and they can't read a complicated panel, then their experience is already off to an unenjoyable start. So the overall design and layout of the trailhead panel goes a long way to enhance that visitor experience before you even get down to what you're writing or the actual words that are on the panel. And a key factor to consider there is the color palette. So not only should it ideally reflect the setting that it's in, such as green for a woodland, but it should also create contrast that allows visitors to immediately pick out the key information. An example here is Woodland Trust. And we'll hear more from Woodland Trust a little later in a case study from Michelle, but I think this is a good example of a brand that does a really great job in using the same colour, in this case green, but use various shades of that. So I've done that in a way that effectively still creates contrast, but sticks to a brand colour, and it's a recognisable brand. But it doesn't compromise that in terms of being able to read the panel. In terms of visual hierarchy, it's maybe better explained through my next slide. So the layout of a slide can be used to create a better visual hierarchy of information. And you've got that kind of primary information that naturally sort of goes from top to bottom on the panel. So that primary information is your introduction and where you are in the context of the site and its own landscape. As well as that, your trail information, the information people immediately want to see and pick out. You need to make that really visual and large. So the distance of the trail, the time it's going to take for them to complete it, what grade is the trail, and a description of what they're going to see along that. And the map, arguably the most important part. And as Bev said, some maps are really complicated to read, so it's important to create an illustrated map that pulls out the key information and doesn't clutter it with everything that could be on the map, creating that just clear illustration. Your secondary kind of information there is your trail grading and your key, probably. Those are the things that support the primary information. So if you're wanting to figure out what does it mean if a trail's moderate, then you can find that out, or strenuous, or what does that mean against an easy trail, and things that help you make that decision. And the key helps you understand the map. Tertiary information, and as I say, that doesn't mean it's less important. That's your safety and your responsible use information. It could be your what 3 words code for your location. If you're in a forest and it's a working site, letting you know what you might come across in the site. If you've brought your dog, what's their dog policy there? Can you ride your horse there? Key contacts and emergency services, and then your partners and funders. So that kind of information that you would go out your way again to look for, that maybe doesn't need to be front and center. That kind of information is usually reinforced throughout the trail, as Philip will go through as well. And that's just a little bit more zoomed in terms of that kind of information on the map. So the map will ideally just pull out that key information. So you just really want to know, where do the trails go? And if I choose the red trail, how does that interact? Am I missing out on something if I don't take the green trail? So it creates that sort of visual cue, or just makes a lot of sense to the site that a lot of text wouldn't, or if there was a lot of text, you probably wouldn't read it. In terms of readability, that's where you're getting into actually what are the words that you're putting onto the board, and what are you trying to explain to your visitor that can't be explained through your map and your images. And that harks back to what we've observed with the diversity of visitors, their reading levels, their abilities, and language diversity. So what you find is much of the best practice around creating clear and concise information through readability is through accessibility guidelines mostly, because essentially good readability, that benefits everyone on your site. So some sort of guidance that generally follows that to improve readability is just to avoid that kind of clutter and the jargon, and getting to the point and being direct. What is the message you want to explain to your visitor? Breaking your text into easy to digest chunks there. So 15 words per sentence, 30 words per paragraph. So really only 2 sentences per chunk of text. And overall on the whole panel, try to stick to no more than 200 words. Use of bold to highlight keywords, but in your font, try not to overcomplicate it. If you can stick to one font, that's great, but try not to have too much of a mishmash. Using meaningful subheadings pulls out that scannable information, and just being direct. A big thing there as well is using your map and your imagery as well there. So text can often sort of be quite overwhelming or quite burdening as well. So a good and well illustrated map or images really do say 1,000 words for you. For example, if I were to ask you right now to describe the layout of your house in words, I won't do that, but if I were to log on to Property Pal this evening, it's easier for me to comprehend the floor plan of a house through an actual diagram or images instead of reams and reams of text. So similarly, if let's say your site's on this huge railway site, visitors probably, some might want to read long paragraphs about the history of that space, but 95 to 100% of visitors are probably going to gain more engagement if they look at a well-chosen set of images that they can look right up from and say, oh, that's where the ticket booth used to be, or the entrance, or that's the railway line there that would have gone there based on this image. So what I want to do next is just sort of put that into practice, that readability and those kind of tips there. So for example, this text here, it says what it has to say. It's a trail description, but what it is also is congested and lengthy, and that's probably the first thing you'd observe about it. And that's quite overwhelming if you just want to make a quick decision on which trail to follow, particularly if there's 3 trails and you're presented with 3 big blocks of text. So it's very much burdened with directions and place names, and what that probably actually does is just saturates it, and it fails to highlight key points of interest. So there's also a lack of directness about it in terms of the historical information. So when it's talking about the history of the site, it's saying words like probably or is said to. It's not very clear on what are the facts there. So with that in mind, and the pacing guidance in that previous slide, essentially the second paragraph says the same amount of information. It's pulled out the jargon, and all those place names and the directions can be explained through a map. So once you start to pull out all that, you can start to identify where you can sort of break up the text into manageable chunks. And what we've got here is, a paragraph in bold that tells you where the trail is going to take you. Another paragraph that identifies your key points of interest or anything that's optional about the site and the history of the site. But what I can often do whenever you start to bring down the text to, that sort of 8 to 12-year-old reading level is you don't want your text to read robotically either. So what's important is probably to strip it back and then start to add in your kind of conversational tone. So talking about taking a rest and, peaceful strolls and that kind of language there that sort of keeps it more conversational and light and relaxing as well. And finally, just to hark back to what Bev covered there earlier on, just planning strategically about your signage before you even put anything in the ground. So it's important within your guidelines and rules, as restrictive as they may be or as rigid as they may be, to try and see where you have room for flexibility. So one important aspect is that as sites change and grow, you don't want that cluttering of signage that can often happen. And sometimes you just don't get the signage right the first time. It's a sort of a constantly evolving kind of thing on any site. So as new trails and features are introduced, or as safety information needs to be revised or communicated, having designated areas on a trailhead panel for these updates can ensure consistency in the design or messaging, whether that's through sort of a notice board or attachable sections that can be sort of taken off and replaced quite cost effectively. This overall approach just keeps that sort of visual brand coherent, and it reduces confusion and helps visitors navigate a trail system without compromising on that kind of aesthetic integrity. Another key consideration in terms of that flexibility is making sure that your strategy caters for individuals with those visual impairments. So incorporating those sort of tactile elements such as braille or embossed symbols or even auditory features. Those are ways to make your trailhead panels more accessible and inclusive. And by providing information in multiple languages where needed, we can eliminate sort of the language barrier being that sort of challenge to accessing a site and comprehending a site. And it ensures that everyone can understand and engage with the trail's features and safety guidelines and points of interest to any degree. But taking in all these steps, what it also does is just it demonstrates this commitment to creating inclusive and welcoming environment for every trail user. As I say, it all benefits everyone. So this is my final slide here, just to sort of close off there. I do want to summarize that if there's one key thing to sort of take from this, and it's probably been repeated throughout all these slides here, is that readability just benefits everyone when you're accessing a site. So what I've covered really focuses on that key visitor hub area and making sure that's coherent for everyone. But now what I'm going to do is just hand you back to Philip. He's going to walk us through next stage of the wayfinding process, and that's sort of delving into the trail network itself through waymarking and trail safety signage as well.
Thanks, Joe. If you bear with me, I'll get my screen up. I'm just going to scroll across to the right slides. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. As Joe mentioned, I'm going to provide a bit of an introduction to wayfinding and safety signage at your sites. I suppose, first of all, by way of an introduction, which I didn't do at the start, I am Philip Weston, and I'm head of place shaping at Outdoor Recreation NI, and I've been working alongside Joe, Bev, and other colleagues in signing and developing messaging at a variety of sites across Northern Ireland. So I'm going to provide an introduction to wayfinding and site signage. And Joe mentions this is when you're moving around the site, sort of beyond that hub where the trailhead signage is, etc. All of this works alongside your signage strategy and the hierarchy, and it will evolve as your site develops and grows. So for those that maybe don't know too much or have less experience, what is wayfinding? So wayfinding is basically managing visitor flow by helping the visitor get from A to B, from one place to another, using directional signage, and it allows you to maximize the site offering. It's a tool to help manage your trail system or trail network. And whenever we look at safety signage is basically used to make sure users are aware of hazards and risks at the site and allows them to manage their activity and actions appropriately. And both are basically decision-making tools for your visitor that help to ensure responsible access, assist with change in behaviour, and help to build confidence in the visitor and user when they're at the site. The approach to decision-making when developing wayfinding and safety signage, it starts from day one at concept stage. But really, these are always elements at the back of your mind, no matter what stage you're developing or managing a site, whether you're working on a brand new site that's recently been developed or an established site where you need to revisit the signage or have other, I suppose, issues or functions that need to be addressed as a result of visitor management. The process involves looking at the visitor journey through the site along your trail or trail system. As Beverley mentioned earlier, ensuring that your signage is well informed and well placed will ensure you create a safe and positive visitor experience, which is what we're all aiming for. So when we're looking at wayfinding and safety signage, there's quite a bit of crossover. So we have sort of four main considerations that we look at when we're developing these aspects of signage. So knowing your visitor, mentioned previously by Beverley, understanding your visitor is key. Understanding their needs helps you to identify the type of wayfinding and safety signage and the extent to which you need to direct and manage your visitor. So you need to understand who your visitor is. Is it young families, experienced walkers, casual walkers, disabled visitors, dog walkers, or a mixture of some or all of these? Do they require additional support from this type of signage to help them navigate and enjoy the site safely? So this support may be through the colour, symbology, the height of signage, the language used, and the differentiation between all of these will help the visitor understand and ensure that they are on the correct trail whenever they determine their level of difficulty, access, length, etc., and decide which trail or which route they wish to follow. We also need to consider the trail grade in relation, I suppose, to accessibility as well, and whether it's fully accessible, whether it's moderate, easy, or strenuous. And that also impacts how we use wayfinding and safety signage. Our next consideration is activity. So what activities are they doing? Knowing the activity or activities that are being carried out, so it could be walking, cycling, equestrian, multi-use, all ability, will dictate things like frequency and location of signage, as well as the look and feel, for example, to give confidence to the visitor when walking, for example, forgot about a comma there, to give confidence to the visitor when walking a long distance between two junctions, you may need to install additional waymarking along a section to give confidence to them that they are on the right route. Or, for example, along a mountain bike trail, you may need to consider placing signage at a distance from a junction so they know to slow down as they come to a turn or crossing point of two trails. Likewise, walkers would need to know to be warned of trails when they're on a shared use trail that, for example, equestrian or horse riders may be coming past, so that they can act appropriately, give space, and also just to expect to see the animals on their route. Navigation is another element that we look at, and it's obviously managing where you want to take the user through your site, and it's the managing the conflict of where the visitor wants to go versus where you want the visitor to go. This is the directional aspect to make sure the visitor stays to the trail, doesn't follow informal routes or enter areas of the site that they shouldn't be entering. And it includes making sure you're navigating the visitor along a route that's appropriate to their ability based on the trail grading, looking at the distance, the gradient and the elevation. You'll determine the route to allow the visitor to avail of the best bits of the site. We would refer to these as the positive and negative control points. So positive control points being areas that you want to take the visitor to, for example, a viewpoint, a rest area, or maybe a heritage feature. And negative control points, which are areas that you want to avoid, which would be hazards, sensitive areas of the site, proximity to private land, or where livestock may be. And we can do all this with a combination of wayfinding, of safety signage, and through physical demarcation on the trail surface. The final consideration is site setting. So the environment in which your site is set is important, as it determines the appropriateness and level of wayfinding and signage intervention. So you need to consider, is it rural, is it urban, upland, lowland setting, and what is suitable within that environment. When considering the landscape, we think about the topography, sightlines between points and junctions, sense of place, and ease of orientation using landscape features around us. Examples of site setting, and there's a few, and how those impact the level and type of signage. I'm just going to provide a couple of examples on that. So the first example is Fairhead, which is located in Ballycastle on the Causeway Coast, near to Ballycastle on the Causeway Coast. It's a 3-mile loop walk which takes users past historic locks and open green farmland to the sheer cliff edge of Fairhead, and it offers spectacular views over the coast towards Ballycastle and Rathlin Island, and looking down over the picturesque Murlough Bay. Generally, a site like this would be considered remote, upland, and would not require any wayfinding, as the anticipated visitor would be experienced hill walkers, generally with a reasonable understanding of navigation. However, the site was used a number of years back as a set for the Game of Thrones television series, and the site became more popular with tourists and locals alike, most of whom would be considered to be inexperienced visitors for this kind of environment. The site has no trail or no formal defined trail, rather the route is a worn natural line on the ground. Therefore, the risk to those unfamiliar with this sort of environment and hazards associated with getting lost, with a steep fall from the cliff edge, the undulating and rough terrain, and often deteriorating weather conditions meant that the visitor management was necessary. To help manage the visitors, waymarkers were installed, and you can see in the left image, were installed to help direct visitors safely around the site, and repair works were also carried out in heavily eroded sections of the trail line. The waymarkers were installed, sit prominently in the landscape, and are visible with their white top, therefore making them more obvious in poor conditions. And visitors follow from one waymarker to the next, taking them safely around the route. Another example of environmental setting and how that impacts, and sort of site setting and how that impacts the type of signage and the type of messaging that you do. So Drumcera Forest, which is a forest opposite Slieve Croob in County Down, which we developed in 2019 in partnership with New Morning Down District Council. The site offers, it's a very family-friendly site. It offers a mix of 3 walking trails and family cycling trails, and an equestrian route covering about 20 kilometres in total. As some of the paths there are shared in places, we ensured that bold colours were used in the waymarker discs to differentiate each of the routes. In addition, the trail name was included on the waymarker disc and orientated to allow the trail name to be readable no matter what way the arrow was pointing. Helpful in case you would forget the colour of the trail you're following. So if you look at the map in the bottom left-hand corner, so it sort of gives you a bit of an idea as to how the site topographically is laid out. So the site, it is undulating. It comprises 3 densely forested hills on 3 elevations, and you can see where the circles are. The 3 blue circles, those sort of represented the elevated areas. The dashed line then represents the valley that sort of cuts through the site in the middle. And whenever you're in that valley and you've walked from sort of the southwestern side to the northeastern side of the site, you lose a lot of the visual cues, a lot of the orientation based on the surrounding landscape, and it can be difficult to orientate yourself because of the tall, dense forest. So after the site was opened, we found the visitors became disorientated when they ventured into the northeastern corner of the site due to the topography and lack of landscape elements for orientation. Subsequently, we installed an orientation panel at a key junction at that red dot in the middle of the site, as well as car park signs on waymarker posts around the site that would allow users to return to the car park via the quickest route, no matter where they were on the trail. It's necessary to highlight safety signage, given its importance as a tool to manage visitor health and safety. So the subject, I suppose, is a topic and webinar on its own. However, we've sought to summarise some of the key recommendations when developing visitor safety information. It's important to note that each site and hazard should be looked at on an individual basis and information developed through appropriate risk assessments. But whenever we look at the safety signage element, we're generally looking at it from three perspectives and three different areas of visitor safety signage. Basically to see how and when the visitor is informed. So first of all, we look at the journey, during the visitor journey, and that's about providing the right information at the right time to let the visitor know what is expected of them and advise them that they share responsibility for their own safety. Second aspect is communicating with visitors. So this looks at how you inform the visitor through messaging, both on site and before your visitors attend the site. This could be, for example, through websites, through targeted education for key groups who may be at risk from visiting your sites, as well as information on literature like tickets or flyers for the site. The third element for safety signage is on the actual signs themselves, and this is whenever they're placed around your site. So this is about how you display and manage safety information, messages that need to be portrayed to visitors, for example, prohibitory information, safety information. These should be contained within main signs instead of erecting additional signage close to main signs. However, different sites require additional signage if they have additional policies or issues or to reinforce hazards at specific locations, for example, dog policy or hazards such as deep water or a sheer drop. This is an example of some of the safety signage that we've installed in the past. So they contain basic, clear instructions, safety messages that are used to keep visitors safe during their visit. They use standard symbology alongside bespoke design. They keep the message positive and friendly. And these signs can be located at the hazard or in the lead up to a hazard, depending on the exact circumstance. Where possible, we try to avoid using standard health and safety signage, as they often present the message poorly and will often be ignored. However, they can be effective in particular locations. So when signing a site, it's easy to become overwhelmed, I suppose, as a site manager, particularly if you have an extensive trail system across a large site with lots of junctions and poor sightlines. The best way to understand the solution from our point of view, whenever we're working on sites, is to walk the site and the routes. We try to put ourselves in the position of the most vulnerable, unfamiliar or inexperienced visitor. Imagine how they'll need to navigate each junction or turn, how they will navigate the trails. And we ask ourselves how they could get lost or respond to a hazard or junction. Also, for existing sites, it's important to consider how we or you can open up areas of a site that perhaps even frequent visitors are not familiar with, and resultantly also enhance the visitor experience. When we're wayfinding at new sites or revisiting existing signage at a site, we consider a number of the factors below. First of all, we look at avoiding confusion and over-signing. We want to consider if the signage is needed. Is it definitely required? And we would consider looking at removing or replacing old, broken, discoloured or poorly maintained signage that no longer serves a purpose. Keeping it simple for you and the visitor is really important. You don't want to make it too complex for the visitor. You want to make it easy for them to travel from junction, from waymarker to waymarker, so that they can get around your site. We want to make sure that the signage is engaging and consistent. The colours are bold, in keeping with the environment, and consider how the colour should reflect the difficulty of the trail, for example, with mountain biking routes. With symbology, you want to keep it simple. Use existing symbols where appropriate. For example, the use of a wheelchair symbol indicates universally that a trail is accessible. You can consider using footprints for walking, a hoof symbol for horse riding, or just even simple arrows. When identifying locations for your messaging, make sure you look at good visibility and sightlines. Consider the distance from junctions so that the visitor has time to make decisions. This is particularly important for those traveling at speed, for example, those on mountain bikes. Consider the correct direction of travel, including both directions of travel if the visitor can return via the same trail, if they need to in an emergency, or if they required to get back to the hub. Consider maintenance, the amount of vegetation that could possibly go up and around the waymarker post or the visitor safety sign. Try and find out if there's a better position. Maintenance will also influence the materials and method for securing the posts. Confirmatory signage, as I mentioned before, is a useful tool. There's no sort of hard or fast rule. If it feels too long since the last waymarker post or the last directional signage, then it likely is, and it's probably a good point to include an additional signage to I suppose, give confidence to the visitor to let them know that they're on the right route. Consider the number of posts or numbering posts to tie in with trailhead or printed mapping. This acts as a method for visitors to know where they are. If they do get lost, they can look at the post and look at the map and associate where the number is and work out a route back to the start. Use all alternative forms of messaging for directional safety signage. Finger posts, mid-side orientation panels, for example, the one described at Drumkeira. Consideration of shortcut routes back, for example, to get back to car parks. The process of installing, I suppose, demarcation along the edge of the trail, so that's boulders or logs, etc., to try and make sure that the visitor sticks to the trail. Temporary signage as well for diversions and trailhead archways that Joe, for example, had previously mentioned within Gosford as a welcome to where you are as well. So just by way of a summary, as I mentioned in the first slide, these are decision-making tools for your visitor that help to ensure responsible access, assist with change in behaviour, and help to build confidence in the end user. To ensure they're effective, then it's important to keep the signage and messaging simple, avoid confusion, and get the balance right to help keep the visitor safe and create positive visitor experiences. As we mentioned previously, there is no one-size-fits-all, but hopefully the information provided will help you direct towards installing appropriate waymarking and safety signage for your site. There is a lot of guidance on this, and we would encourage you to explore this as you develop signage for your site. Some of the documents that we would use and that we would follow were mentioned previously, and these slides will be made available for you to review, so you can get some of the titles of those documents to review yourself. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle from Woodland Trust. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you for inviting me here today. I'm just going to load up my presentation here. Hopefully this works. Okay. So thanks to ORNI for inviting me here to talk today. I'm the engagement officer from the Woodland Trust Northern Ireland. My name's Michelle McCaughtry, and my role is divided across two main areas. One is managing a programme of events for the Woodland Trust Northern Ireland across our Woodland estate, and the other is looking after signage and interpretation on our Woodland sites. And that covers everything from content creation to managing the design process, tenders, briefs, everything from getting the sign from concept into the actual site. So what I hope to do today is I'm going to talk about a new woodland that we've opened last year, Morn Park. And what I'd like to do with this then is use that hopefully to demonstrate a few of the principles that some of the other guys have been mentioning today. And hopefully you'll find that useful. So just to start by saying a wee bit about the Woodland Trust Northern Ireland. So just in case you don't know, the Woodland Trust are the largest woodland conservation charity in the UK. We have 500,000 supporters, and we have three main aims which influence how we organise and manage our woodlands. We want to see a UK rich in native woods and trees. We are very much focused on protecting ancient woodland. It's a very rare habitat in Northern Ireland. It's only 0.04% of our woodlands, so it's a key focus for us. And running alongside that as well, we're looking to protect that ancient woodland and also restore damaged ancient woodland and bring it back to its original glory. And then the third aim that we are focused on is woodland creation. So that's very much planting new woodlands and creating new habitats and resilient landscapes for people and wildlife. So in Northern Ireland, we look after over 50 woods. They're a mixture of ancient woodland, long established woodland, and newly planted woodland. And I suppose our unique selling point is that access to all our woods and all our woodland sites is free, and it's open 24/7, so everyone has the opportunity to experience native woodland. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about our brand and how that relates into how we organise our signage on our sites before moving on to talk specifically about Mourne Park. So we've recently had a new brand developed. Our brand is key to everything that we do. To us, it's more than just a selection of colours and palettes and a tone of voice. It underpins our whole identity. So all our signage and everything that we do relates into our main proposition as a woodland charity and as a brand. And our main proposition is, as you can see there, we're fighting for the health of people and planet with every tree. We have a lot of different audiences and we talk to a lot of different people in the work that we do. So everything from visitors to our sites, to politicians, fundraisers, volunteers, and no matter who we're talking to, this is the main proposition that it underlines everything that we do and our whole brand. And as you can see there, that's connected to our voice and how we speak to people. We are trying to be, with this proposition, we're trying to be unapologetic, we're trying to be unembellished, and we're trying to sound unexpected. We want to challenge people's perceptions of woodland, and this is how we use that, using the brand and our tone of voice. There's a lot more to it. That's just a very quick overview of how we want to sound and how we want to look as a brand. So the brand that we're working with at the minute, this relates directly to all the on-site experiences that our visitors have, whether it be signage or wayfaring. Our visitors begin their journey with us when they arrive at the website, and even from that early stage, then we want people to be seeing the same colours, the same tone of voice coming through, so that when they're researching where to go and then when they arrive on site, it all ties together and is consistent, and that provides more confidence for the visitor, helps them guide themselves, and ensures they have the best knowledge and the best experience on site. And then as well, we want them to leave them with a clear vision of where they've been and what site they've been to and who we are. And I'll just move on to this one. So this consistency across our brand is reflected in our signage and our entrance signage. So all our signage follows the same format. All our woods should look the same. We have ladder boards, which serve as our welcome panel, and these also have funder logos on them. Our gates are identical. Everything is forest FSC, and we also try to use local suppliers where possible. And you can see an example there of our waymarker discs on our waymarker posts. So again, these are consistent across all of our sites, across Woodland Trust sites in Northern Ireland. We do tailor the waymarker discs to match in with the other suite of signage across a particular site, which you'll see in Mourne Park in a minute. And that again helps to emphasise our brand, and that people should know where they are when they come to one of our sites, and it's a Woodland Trust site. So there should be no confusion about that, and that's our main aim. So Mourne Park, this is our newest acquisition. It's situated outside Kilkee in the Mournes. It's a very large site for us, and it's one of our flagship sites now in Northern Ireland. It's a lovely mixture of ancient woodland and long established woodland with the Whitewater River flowing through it, and it's an absolutely fantastic site. So it's a large site, but this is really gives us the opportunity to showcase a whole variety of different signage and trails. And I just want to say here as well that ORNI have been really helpful with this as well. They have given us a lot of information and guidance on this as we've developed this. So this woodland was originally a private estate. It had been closed to the public. So when we acquired it last summer for opening, there was a very limited path network. There were no signs, no infrastructure, and access was only allowed to a very small group of people who paid for an annual pass, mainly fishermen. The wood itself is 156 hectares of long established and ancient woodland, and this makes it particularly precious for us, bearing in mind the very small amount of ancient woodland that there is left in Northern Ireland. So the main challenge with this site then was to work out how we could open the site, install paths and a path network and signage for visitors, but to do it in a managed way that would allow public to access the woodland, but remain true to our woodland conservation goals. Located just outside Kilkeel, and when we look at a wood, we generally start off by looking at the surrounding area before we even get to designing what sort of signage and how our strategy is going to work for that and how the trails are going to look. We have a look at the surrounding area and the demographics in that area, just to give us a steer on the type of visitors we would expect to be coming to that woodland, and then also the type of visitors we want to encourage. And our initial research showed there was very little accessible woodland of this type close by to Kilkeel itself. We also have Ockram Hill in the area as well, but it's a newly planted woodland, so this is quite unique. So based on this and other demographic information, we planned that our first key group of visitors most likely would be dog walkers and older, more mature visitors. And from our own point of view, we were looking to encourage families to come here, to encourage young people to enjoy this woodland. So all this information that we were able to find out around Mourne Park before we began the process of planning our signage interpretation really helped guide all that planning and all that consultation and fed into the type of signage that we initially developed. I should say that this is an initial opening of Mourne Park with a very basic offering of trails, and our long-term plan then is to develop this further. So this isn't what our orientation panels look like. So as you can see there's not a lot of text to them. We try and keep them very simple for some of the reasons that Joe had outlined earlier. We do a little bit of information about history, a wee bit about wildlife, and a bit about the woodland itself. So it's very basic. And for this one here, so we developed 3 trails to have a wee look to see where people would want to go first. We've been guilty in the past, I think, of opening up woodlands and not putting in trails where people want to go, but where we want them to go. So we were very aware of this in this instance. So you can see there the trails are looped, and there's a variety of different lengths for different visitors. So what we did then after this initial opening with these 3 basic trails is that we've now spent over a year talking to visitors and trying to develop a plan for the next phase of Mourne Park in order to better, I suppose, plan for the future and what our visitors want and what we haven't been offering. So again, there's been a lot of consultation, and that's something that we place a lot of emphasis on. And you can see there as well that we also have actually I'll just skip on to the next one. We also use the Pass for All grading system from Scotland, which we use again across all our estate in Northern Ireland, again to give that consistency to visitors. So when they arrive at a woodland trustwood, they'll see the same style of signage and the same gradient information about the type of paths. So it gives them that confidence again that they'll be able to choose a suitable route that's suitable for their abilities. And for this one here as well, just in terms of the language too, so Bluebell Walk, it's our shorter, more accessible route around the wood. So because of that, we called it a walk in order to so people would get an idea of what they were getting from the start. And then the Woodland Loop does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a loop, goes around the wood and comes back. And then the Whitewater Trail is for more able visitors and people who want a wee bit more of a challenging walk. So it's to our mind more of a trail. So it's even just using the language in that sense to try and tailor it to your visitors when they arrive, so they get clues and obvious cues to what type of visit they would like. And there's one other thing just to mention about Mourne Park here as well. You can see there, and the image here is of the entrance from the car park down into the main woodland. This is one of the barriers that we did find. It's a 10-minute walk straight down to the woods. It's very exposed, and it's something that visitors have said that it's the part they don't enjoy. They just like to get straight down to the woodland. It's very straight, very boring, and it's the least engaging area. So what we plan to do with this is to reroute this entrance, leaving this as an easy access for people who know the wood well and want to go straight down quickly. And we're also going to develop a new route in, which will be a lot more interesting, and to take people down towards the bluebells, which is one of the main highlights of the wood in spring. So once we are up and running and we had all our trails in, we went through a process of consultation with visitors. So we opened the 1st of August last year, and since then we've spoken to over 500 people both online and also in the wood doing face-to-face studies. And we've got a lot of information back, which we're going to use now to feed into the next section of our development at Mourne Park and into the next part of the trail development. So some of the things that we've been told that we need to pay attention to is there's a lot of requests for more signage to get people from the main road into our main car park. Mourne Park set off the road a bit. It's beside a golf club and it's not immediately obvious where it is as you're driving down the main road. So in response to that, we've applied for a brown sign as we're now sitting at around 50,000 visitors. And imagine that's going to go up. So we're going to get that put in to help with that. And then interestingly enough, a lot of people also said they don't like to see a lot of signs in somewhere like Mourne Park where there's a lot of ancient woodland and it's very beautiful. And there was a lot of people asking for us to keep it wild and natural and not clutter the place up with signs. And I think using our brand, we try not to do that. We try to keep signs to a minimum and amalgamate them into one sign and use different methods for people to try and get guidance to their visit. So we've had some challenges with visitors visiting the site. One main challenge was the different visitor groups that access Mourne Park. It's a local wood, so we get a lot of local people coming, and most of them would be all right finding their way around. But when we initially opened, we attracted a lot of visitors from across Northern Ireland and from the Republic of Ireland. We had a lot of people who, despite our best efforts, got lost and couldn't find the car park once they were down in the depths of the wood. And this is despite us checking the trails, putting up the waymarker discs, and testing it out ourselves. So in response to that, we've had to put in extra waymarker discs and be that bit more flexible to get people back to the car park. And we've also put in an additional orientation panel as well, right down in the heart of the wood, as well as at the car park, so people could see where they were going. So the other visitor group then that we had were the people that were the more experienced walkers, and they did want more of a challenge. So they did the whole park, and then they were looking to see what they could do next. So with this, we're going to address this in the next stage of development by opening up McCaughtry Hill, so people can go up there as well. Another challenging group have been dog walkers. It's been a lot of dog walkers come to Mourne Park, so we've had to add some guidance around our dog walking code of conduct and put some signage up around that as well. And one of the other things that we did find as well is that there was a huge issue around managing expectations. We are new to this area. We haven't had a woodland here before of this scale. So people didn't really know a lot about the Woodland Trust's ethos and how we manage our ancient woodlands. And I mean, we don't put cafes in, we don't install toilets, it's all kept very natural. And the main sticking point for Mourne Park was the fact that we didn't put a bin in the wood. There's a bin in the car park, but we don't put them in the woods due to the effect on wildlife, especially here with we've got a lovely thriving colony of red squirrels. So there was a lot of education to do around that as well. So some of that's been done through signage and some of it's been done through other work offline or online. And one other aspect then of Mourne Park that was difficult for the wayfinding was designing our paths around the ancient woodland. So that was a difficult issue as well. We were caught between, you want to showcase the beauty of the bluebells, in particular in the ancient woodland, which what people have come to see in their thousands each year, and also protecting those bluebells, letting people get as close as possible, but without actually on top of the bluebells and protecting those bluebells. So we use our brand in particular around the bluebells. This year we have used the brand and its unapologetic tone to try and address the issues around visitors going off trail and wanting to explore and wanting to get selfies amongst the bluebells. So we tried to use the brand to do this by using a more unexpected tone of voice. So rather than putting up messages around the wood to say, don't walk on the bluebells, stay on the path, don't trample them, don't do this, we kind of tried to flip that on its head and change the message to beware the bluebells instead. And this has worked really well. People are really responding very positively to it. They find it quite funny, and I think it's catching their attention more than a load of signs that say don't wood. So this is one example of how we've used the brand and that unapologetic, unexpected message to try and get across one of our woodland conservation messages. And then on the back of that as well, we also have then developed an exit sign then too. And we're going to ask people for financial support as they're leaving, and that's linked to their visit around the bluebells. And this signage then will be reused every year. Other temporary signage that we have put up around the Mourne Park. This one is a family trail, which went up on a temporary basis over the Easter holidays. And again, rather than tell people what they shouldn't do in our woods, we're encouraging them to tell them what they should do. So in this case, this is aimed at families and kids. So it's encouraging them to pick up sticks, to pause and take a breather, and to look at the wood in a new way through these frames, which have gone up around the woodland. And we've had over 200 people came to a special event then to launch this back in Easter. And again, these will go up each year. So it's this kind of seasonal messaging as well that you need to tie in with your brand, as well as the more permanent entrance signage. So our key learnings from what we've been doing in Mourne Park: you need to allow enough time to plan your complete visitor journey and using the brand to guide people right through from the website or their first initial contact with you, right through to the wood and beyond. This is really important. Especially I think the exit signs are crucially important. We have problems with the Woodland Trust Northern Ireland, and that we get confused a lot with the National Trust. So this is something that we like to have the exit signs up, and just so the last thing that people see is something around your own organisation, so they know where they've been and they can talk to people and encourage other people to come back. Consultation is key. Again, you need to watch your own assumptions about visitors' understanding. We fell down into this pitfall with some of our trails and not having enough signage to get people back to the car park, because we were coming at it from a very confident outdoor woodland visitor, and we had a lot of people that weren't that type of visitor, and it was great to see them. And one of the other things to do with that as well is that we would ideally have road tested the trails with a bit more time before we opened, just to try and avoid that in future. So that's something that we've definitely looked to do again, and one of our key learnings. And again, brand consistency throughout the whole site from start to finish, so everyone knows where they are and who you are. And then the final point then from me is, again, I think Joe said as well about this, it's so important to review and monitor your signage. Things crop up, especially on an outdoor active woodland site. There's always things happening. There's more signs need to be changed and adjusted. It's constantly changing. It's a very fluid process. In our case here, we've been monitoring our visitor numbers, and it looks like in the first year of opening, we'll be up to probably 100,000 visitors by the end of this summer. So that for us will bring a whole range of different issues in the paths as well, and we'll need to be keeping an eye on that. So that's all I have to say about Mourne Park. I just finished by encouraging you to pay Mourne Park a visit if you're down in the Mournes. It's really worth the trip. It's worth the trip. It's an amazing site, and you'll have a lovely day out. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michelle. And thank you to our other speakers, Philip, Joe and Bev there. I kind of wanted to just give a quick roundup and some key learnings that I took from all those presentations. So I think it's important that we don't have to be competitive with our sites. You know, we can all learn from each other, and there's a lot of great guidance out there that we can all take. So it doesn't have to be, you know, my signage is better than yours. We can all learn from each other. Pre-entry users, you know, who do you usually expect and who do you want to attract then? So kind of alter your messaging that way and your signage. Think about your sites individually, but not totally in silo. You want to keep your branding kind of consistent through all of them. And the why is really, really important. And to be unapologetic and unexpected. I thought those were really great notes from Michelle there. So well done to everyone there. And I think we have time for some questions. I know there's a couple in the chat already. Vincent had put some through. So if we want to start off with those, and then we'll open the floor to anybody else who's kind of got any questions. So the first question was, Joe, many managers are probably looking at recreational route signage, and we've highlighted that language is key. What do we think about the use of the word trail?
Yep, thanks, Vincent. That's one I'm glad that was typed in the chat beforehand, so I had a chance to think about it beforehand. So I'm glad you gave me a chance to ponder that for a minute. But I suppose that's perhaps where I myself would get complacent, and I would use the word trail sort of mindlessly now, just countless times a day. But I suppose you need to take stock there that for the public, that word can probably evoke a sense of, you know, a rugged terrain or an informal natural track or exposed roots and rocks and things. So, you know, as we're opposed to ourselves or a land manager would have a more broad view of what that encompasses as well in terms of the inclusivity of it, or just, you know, that more formal surface. So I suppose while a trail is more commonly used, perhaps as that was commonly used, probably not appropriate by itself, the word trail on its own, to describe like a really accessible or surface path. I suppose the alternatives there are things like pathway or greenway. But probably another side of the coin, those are maybe associated more urban as time goes on as well. So I know what we do, at least in sites that there's a trail that has, you know, step-free access and it's surfaced and it's maybe 1.2 to 1.5 meters wide. We sort of prefix that trail with the word multi-use. So a multi-use trail would be probably more appropriate for a well-maintained and accessible route. And it probably just helps convey that more inclusive nature, that you could walk, cycle, use a wheelchair on it. And that's probably what we would use by the term multi-use, and we'd probably explain that further in trailhead signage and the likes. I suppose it's probably up for discussion as well. I suppose there's probably no one size fits all there, and it's probably a matter of a land manager, you know, taking into account the context of the site, but also the visitor themselves, and probably grounding whatever terminology they want to go for in that visitor and what their expectations and what they perceive a trail to be.
Thanks, Joe. Fair play for trying to answer that. It's a difficult one. I know ORNI have been working with a few other organisations, especially down the south, that and getting together some sort of generic language is really important. And I think a lot of the councils and a lot of other organisations are more using trail to describe that more accessible one, and then pathway or mountain path or whatever. But it's something that I think all folks need to be conscious of, and maybe could be expanded further. But yeah, welcome to the ORNI team, Joe, and best of luck.
Thanks, Vincent. Philip, there's a lot of questions coming through about Fairhead as an example. What do we think about it as an underdeveloped setting, or I suppose somewhere where there's an obvious danger element?
Yeah, so there's comments there, yes, from both Vincent and Helen. Thank you both for commenting on that. And I suppose I sort of anticipated that using Fairhead as an example would be, I suppose, controversial, because it is seen by different parties and different people just differently. I would caveat that this isn't one of our sites, and it's not a site that we have been involved in, but I think it shows the importance of effective messaging to try and help manage visitor safety. I understand the perspective of it. Helen, you had mentioned there about it not being, or it being an obvious hazard, you know, the actual cliff edge itself. But I would assume, not having spoken to the land managers or the landowners themselves, that, you know, the reason is because it's not just the cliff, it's down to the surfacing, it's down to the other obstacles like the lakes, it's the weather, it's the fact that it comes really down to the visitor and their inexperience. You'll be getting tourists that will be coming to Northern Ireland that, you know, won't have the right attire, probably shouldn't be in that environment because of the draw from the television series, that they will want to go down and see it no matter what. And I expect that the land manager and landowner felt that they had a responsibility to try and help with the navigation around the site, and outside of, you know, sort of guided tours or walks that not every visitor wants to go on. Then this was probably deemed to be the most appropriate, without having to put in significant trail infrastructure, you know, just sort of way markers. But I would also add that it's not the most appropriate solution for every location, whether it's famous or not. And this is probably quite an isolated, you know, example. But if you're looking at, for example, the Mourns and Donard, you know, your signage takes you to the edge of the Glen River Trail at the sort of the edge of the forest, and then beyond there, you know, that's upland environment, and that, you know, it's not bar the pathworks, you know, there's no signage up there for you really to, you know, to be able to follow. But yes, it's quite a unique example. Hopefully that has answered your question a little, but happy to discuss further.
Thanks, Philip. Look, I think the social media and how we find new users in quite remote settings very suddenly is really something that presents a challenge. And I think the visitor safety group approach, the risk control matrix, does provide us with a framework, but it's a conversation I'd love to continue, perhaps through VSG.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, you know, the history, the background of Fairhead is complex. Yeah, look, that's probably enough to say on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. Dwayne and Catherine have their hands up, so we'll go to them next. Dwayne, if you want to go first.
Yeah, so my example would be one that's quite close to ORNI, given that you're based in the park itself. It's Barnet Domain and the kind of visitor experience there, and how you go about such a complex site like that, where there are just blurred boundaries of land ownership, where it's all publicly accessible. And you've got the likes of Queens in the middle of it who have signed up saying it's private property. But then you have the likes of the Barnet Domain mountain bike trails, which are not technically at the trailheads, not in the main site itself. It's on a satellite site at Mary Peters Track. How would you go about trying to marry that site into one cohesive visitor experience would be my question to you. And it's a really complex thing. I've really enjoyed getting the bits of information from the seminar, and Michelle as well, your bit about the seasonal stuff. I know that our outreach officers are kind of keen to do something very temporary just around the trees and that. But if you have any kind of advice just as to where you would even start with Barnet Domain, it would be really useful to get a bit of insight there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
that's okay. I suppose, yeah, we do work at the site, and I totally know where you're coming from. Yeah, it's a very porous site. You've got lots of different activities that are coming along, or that are, I suppose, happening within that location. I suppose from the visitor management point of view, you'd be looking at the signage hierarchy and I suppose developing some sort of hub within the area where everyone can then spread out, you know, to go around the various different trails. The difficulty is those landowners, so that's probably about a bit of partnership working, you know, with Queen's University to try and resolve some sort of, I suppose, shared signage hierarchy, or some shared signage strategy that can be used and rolled out across the whole of the site. But it would be a very interesting project to be involved in, Dwayne. And we would relish the opportunity. But there's Chris is on to it, is he? Okay, yeah.
Well, he's trying to get onto it.
Yeah, it's also difficult because you have very defined entrances as well. You know, you do have the Barnet Domain area, you know, for the sort of the walking trails, and the Malone House area is one area, and you also have the you know, the mountain biking is separate with Mary Peters, so that also comes down to how you promote it, you know, externally and you know, sort of from the pre-site sort of visit side of things. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. But I don't know if Bev or Joe want to add anything. If not,
yeah, I just think, yeah, more about partnership working and trying to maybe come to some understanding of creating a signage strategy together. We're working on a different site down south, and we're working with a landowner and a council as well. And we've tried to bring them together to try and agree kind of what kind of signage hierarchy we're going to place within that site, and that it's going to fulfill both organisations and they're both happy. So it's just really about getting together with them and trying to kind of agree on a way forward.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks, Bev.
And then Catherine, you have your hand up, so if you want to ask your question.
Hi everyone, that was a great session, thank you. And Michelle, loved the case study, those kind of what to do on a site are lovely examples. The question's a bit more specific. It kind of went back to, I think it was Joe was talking about accessibility, and I just wondered, is there anyone in the ORNI team that has worked with Braille, or kind of the differences between 3D mapping? I know it's something that's come up in our studio, so I just wanted to see if there was any experiences or insights you could provide on that.
I'm not aware within ORNI that we've done that yet. We can only sort of point towards best practice. I know most recently the image that I used in my presentation was from Billy Neal Park. That's Lisburn Castlereagh Council. They've done that sort of tactile mapping. In the absence of that, I suppose best practice is there to sort of point towards, but I think a lot of good guidance is there. Disability Sport NI, everybody's good signage about disability, or good guidelines about sort of accessibility in the outdoors, and then Pass for All have also released there recently, the last month or two, good accessibility guidelines as well, which I think they're in the early part of the presentation, but we can signpost you towards as well. But that's where the first place I would look towards, I think, or to engage with those kind of lived experience organisations themselves.
Yeah, okay, no, definitely. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything else to add, but yeah, we just, cause I think it was one of my colleagues, Richard, came across some interesting material that Braille wasn't actually used as much as people, and then just that 3D mapping was quite a good tactile intervention for people to read different landscapes. So I just wonder if you come across it in any of your work. But yep, thanks. Any resources you can signpost is always helpful.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Super. I think we'll maybe go for one more. Does anybody have any information on the value or usage of QR codes and signage? I don't know if we have too much experience with that, guys.
We've just started this actually as a trial at Mourne Park. So we're trialing this across the Woodland Trust estate, Mourne Park, and a couple of other flagship sites. So we're very early stages with it. But so far we have received our QR codes linked through to membership on our website, then through the mobile, and we have received memberships through it so far, and they've only been up in place since the bluebell season, really, so from about April time. So far we're finding it good, but we're waiting to get more insight just to see in terms of click-throughs and the kind of the follow-on journey, how that works as well. So hopefully it's something we'll be able to feed back in more detail at a future point.
I think QR codes are becoming more and more popular, but what I would say is that ensure that you're really only using them to direct people for supplementary information and not really important key information, because you can't rely on them obviously using that. So linking through Michelle to memberships is a fantastic way of using it, but it's just you couldn't be certain that they would see really important information.
Yeah, I would add as well there, we've done that recently the last couple of years with a sort of a community-led trail project in Fermanagh, and where the community group that sort of pushed forward to have the trail had also developed previously like a memory map website that was full of information about the whole area that the trail went through. I suppose that's an example there where you could fill a trailhead panel with lots of information, but it's probably more valuable to, you know, whet the appetite with a bit of curiosity of a couple of facts, because that's all someone's going to really retain is 1 or 2 facts for a panel. But if they want more information as they walk around, if they want to figure out, oh, there's that hill that the battle happened on, there's a QR code that takes them to that memory map. And I suppose the benefit is that as long as that QR code, that link remains, the information can be readily updated as well, because it's digital, so it's probably more cost effective too in that sense too. But definitely, to reiterate what Bev said, it's definitely something for that extra piece of information or that extra bit of curiosity. I think it really benefits.
I suppose it's thinking about who your user is and if they're going to have access to be able to use that. So if you generally have an older demographic, then it's probably pointless in using QR codes on your site for them. So it's again bringing it back to who is your audience.
Look, thanks for all the responses on that, and I see a couple of people have said they might get back with further information as well. We'd certainly welcome that. There's a proposal within Mountaineering Ireland for a project at the minute aimed at hikers, just to provide safety advice through QR codes.
Super. Well, thanks everyone very much for all of your questions. There's even more in the chat, so we'll try and disseminate those and see if we can get even some answers back to you via email if we haven't got to them in the session. So thanks very much everyone for attending. I think it's been a really good session. I am just going to pop a feedback form in the chat, so if anybody wants to kind of give their feedback on the session straight away, it's in there for you to do so. Otherwise, we will send out the link again with your copy of the recording of the session. So if anybody has had to step away early, you won't miss it all. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. It's been good. I'll say it again. So thanks very much to all of our speakers, and everybody enjoy your afternoon.